Welcome everybody to what we hope is going to be a fantastic 2.5 hours, and we've called it the ECIST Lunchtime Takeaway. We've got a packed agenda. So my name is Pete Gordon. I'm Head of Emergency Care Improvement with the Emergency Care Improvement Support Team, also known as ECIST. And I'm going to hand over straight away for 5 minutes to our National Director of Improvement for NHS England and NHS Improvement, to Hugh McCaughey. So over to you, Hugh.
Thanks, Pete. Good morning, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to join you. My name is Hugh McCaughey. I'm the National Director of Improvement, and I'm passionate about improvement and making our services safer and better. I'm absolutely delighted to open this session. I think it looks like a fabulous day and a fabulous program. So I'm only going to say a few words at the start, so as you can get into the exciting and content and detail. But I suppose just a little bit about the context. This is clearly an incredibly difficult time. So many people across the NHS are challenged and are facing incredible and indeed unprecedented challenges. And I think indeed people will look back, I think in 10, 15, 20, even 50 or 100 years time, and look at this as a period, a historic period that we're actually living through, and indeed in many ways having the responsibility for responding to. And it's not just health and care that's challenged, but the whole of society, the whole way we live, not just in this country, but internationally. But it's also a time when we have seen the absolute best of people and of the service. There's been an absolutely incredible response by health and care staff, by NHS staff. I think there's been a real recognition by society, by the public. One only needs to think about the sort of the nation stopping and applauding the value placed on the NHS and its staff. I think has risen and has refreshed that very special relationship that exists. I think has been refreshed, and if you like, almost the vows remade around just how important the NHS is and the people who work in it. But I think part of what is so impressive is the way, the agility, the commitment, the selflessness that we've seen during this period. But also one of the things is, and when I said the agility piece, is the innovation and the way which people have been able to find solutions, find new ways of doing things, introduce things quickly that will help. And I think we will look back on this, and indeed we are gathering at some of this through the sort of work that we're doing around beneficial changes, and see it as a period when there was a huge amount of innovation. I think one of the challenges for us today, and I think what today is about, is celebrating that, is sharing, learning from each other. And I would also sort of stress that making sure we take things away and make sure that we apply those things, because I have a good friend who works in Iceland, and he draws a parallel with the period we're in with the 2008 banking crisis. And he talks about Iceland at that period it was a bit like being caught in an avalanche. And people during that period did what they could to survive. So they were agile, they had ideas, they tried different things, they introduced things, and they did it quickly. But he said one of the things that they observed and learnt from that period, and which they have a sense of deja vu, is once things got to a more stable platform, it actually, they talked about things solidifying, that avalanche almost solidifying, and actually it became difficult to get change immediately after, because people needed a period of stability. So there is, while this is an incredibly challenging and difficult time, it's also a time where we can make change, we can be agile, we can introduce those innovations quickly. And there's lots and lots of examples of that, particularly around areas like the virtual, and how we've introduced virtual and digital solutions in a way which is much more quick than in the past. So I'm absolutely delighted to open this session run by ECIST, and I love the way it's a sort of the lunchtime takeaway. And for me, then, the sort of final piece of advice I would have for you, the clue's in the title. Make sure you take something away. It's very easy to come to these, to share, to learn, and get a bit of a break, to get a sort of, from the challenges we're all facing. But actually, if we can take something away, if we can make a connection that with someone else who we can do a piece of work with, it will benefit our service, the staff that work in it, and the patients and public that we serve. So my final piece of advice is, do try and take something away or make a connection that you can follow up in, so that actually it's not just a good day from listening and hearing about things, but that you actually take back a benefit and apply it. So enjoy the day. I think it's a really exciting agenda, and as the clue in the title is, make sure and take something away. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hugh, and thank you for giving us your time, because we know how busy your schedule is. So I'm going to crack on. Thanks again to Hugh, our National Director of Improvement. I'm going to go now to the Director of Emergency and Elective Care Improvement. So my boss, Stephen Duncan, and also our Medical Director for Elective and Emergency Care Improvement, Dr. Kevin Reynard. So I'm going to go to you first, Stephen. And then you're going to hand over to Kevin. Stephen, are you there?
I'm here, yes. Can you hear me?
Brilliant. Over to you.
Yeah. So, thank you, Pete. So I have the great privilege of leading the three improvement teams that focus on elective emergency and cancer care across the NHS. And one of the things that struck me when looking through the agenda was the kind of the topical, as it was, issue around equality, diversity and inclusion, but more importantly for today, around sort of anti-racism. And it kind of took me back to when I joined the NHS. My career started 30 years ago this month in Luton, and I arrived from Northern Ireland, which is was quite one-dimensional white communities, to Luton, which was highly multicultural. And I think one of the things that has stayed with me throughout this whole thing was about storytelling, and how important it is to listen and tell your story, because stories can reach places that data can't. And I've just been reading a book. I've sort of made myself for Black History Month, try and read books from Black authors, and I'm going to read this because I'll forget it if I don't. But it was, data can persuade people, but it rarely inspires them to act. Wrap your vision in a story that fires the imagination and stirs the soul. And I would just really ask people to think about what they hear today, and think about what they can take back, and also what stories individuals themselves have, and how they can use those to make things better, and actually really start to take action around things like racism and inequalities, rather than just acknowledge that it exists. So thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. Kevin, are you there?
I am there, Pete. I don't seem to be able to start my video, but
we can hear you nice and clearly, Kevin.
Oh, there we are.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. It's great to be joining this session, and to be able to just introduce some aspects of ECIST and the programme. So for those of you that don't know, ECIST is a team that's comprised of both subject matter experts and with the combination with improvement science expertise. We are quite unusual as a team in that we have both a combination of people with expertise in operational management, leadership expertise, but also have a team of clinicians that I'm proud to lead. One of the important things I think we'll pick up on this session is about the the principle about if your eyes are the windows to your soul, then your behaviours are the window to your values. And we talk a lot about the importance of values within healthcare. And we're going to hear today about some important aspects relating to how our behaviours reflect this. And I just want to pick up on one of the sessions that's coming up, and that relates to the importance of kindness and civility at work. And I think this is something that bridges all of the other topics that we're going to hear about. And we'll be told about the evidence related to that in Chris's session that's later on. But I commend the whole session to you. I hope you're able to stay with us for the whole of the lunchtime takeaway, and that you, as Hugh says, you hear some important messages and just think, how's this going to change the way I work? So I'll hand back to Pete now, and let's crack on with the programme.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Kevin and Stephen, so much for that. And I'm going to hand over to, before I hand over to my brilliant colleague, Carla Parker, for the next session, we've got a great speaker, Professor Binna Kandola. I'm going to go to Roy Lilly, who's got a 1-minute announcement about a launch from Fab Stuff. Roy, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Roy, yeah.
Okay, you can't see me, I'm afraid. For some reason or other, my video's dropped out, but let's press on. Look, I'm really pleased to be involved and invited in for this 60 seconds of this session for the introducing the anti-racism at work campaign. It is so very important how we treat each other. The central theme that's come out so far, and I've been looking at all the other video streams, there are 6 going on at once. We've got about 400 people watching live across all the platforms at any one time. It's huge. The theme that's come out is the compassion and the kindness themes, where it's so important that we treat each other in these sort of very pressured times. We treat each other better, we treat each other well, we treat each other with compassion and caring and understanding. And the racism, I just wanted to share with you, this was a conference I was in good old days when you could go to real conferences. I was at a conference, and I sat at lunchtime next to a couple of very nice ladies who were very charming. They read my stuff, and we had a conversation about something I'd written. And I said, you know, what about you? Tell me about you. And they were both MBA graduates. They were both NHS managers. They were super charming, and I described them as the kind of the classic customer for Waitrose. You know, they were in that demographic. They were terrific. And I said, you know, how are you getting on with your career? What are you doing? And they said, oh, they both said, well, I think we've gone as far as we can go. We can't get any more promotion. And I said, well, why is that? And they said, well, it's obvious, Roy, we are West Indian, we're black. And, you know, that hit me over the head like a baseball bat. It never for 1 minute occurred to me that there would be that kind of prejudice in the NHS. And they both went on and shared some private experiences they'd had in their career, in trying to get training grants, in trying to get to the Leadership Academy, in trying to be able to develop their careers and get promotion. And it was a horror story. And so, look, you know, we know that these things go on, and there's only one way to stop it. And that's if we all decide to say, do you know what, we're going to stop this, because it's a waste of human resource, if nothing else, but it's also really insulting to our colleagues. So I'm really pleased to have had the opportunity to say these few words. Thank you for giving it to me, and I wish the anti-racism campaign, a racism work campaign, to be a huge success. And thank you for choosing to launch it on Fab Change Day. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Roy. And as ever, thanks for all the work you do and all the support. I'm going to go straight now to my colleague, Carla Parker, who's going to introduce our next speaker. So over to you, Carla.
Thank you, Pete, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome Professor Binna Kandola, OBE, business psychologist, senior partner and co-founder of Kandola, a business psychology consultancy. Binna is particularly interested in the study of unconscious bias and is the author of a number of critically acclaimed books, including Racism at Work, The Danger of Indifference, and his latest book, which he edited, Free to Soar, Race and Wellbeing in Organisations. Good morning, Binna.
Hey, Carla. Sorry, I can't get my video to work, and but you can hear me. I can see.
We can hear you.
So sorry about that. I've got a tie on and shoes. Hello?
Hi there, yeah, we can hear you. Are you there, Binna?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, what was I missed your question. It was like, you want me to talk about the latest book?
Yeah, and the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, I wrote a book 2 years ago called Racism at Work, The Danger of Indifference. And the subtitle of that book was actually what the book was about, really, that we had become indifferent to the topic of race. It's not the case now. It's clearly over the last few months, there's a lot more attention that's been given to race, but actually over the last period, we have become indifferent to it, and we've ignored its impact. And the latest book is actually looking. This is Free to Soar, Race and Wellbeing in Organisations. It's looking at the impact of discriminatory behaviour on people's well-being and then subsequently on performance. So it's kind of drawing two literatures together, well-being and racism, and kind of say the impact it has on individuals' well-being, but also the impact it has on performance in organisations.
Great, thank you. And when I first kind of came across your work, I was listening to a webinar that you'd done, and you talked about some research that I found really interesting. Would you mind talking to us a bit about that? Yeah,
the people. I mean, there has been a sea change in our attitudes on race, without a doubt. There has been a sea change. We're much more accepting of having minorities as colleagues, as friends, as neighbours, as partners, and we're far less accepting of overt acts of discrimination, whether it's things that people say and display of attitudes or overt racist behaviours. And this has led people to kind of conclude that racism is on its way to being eradicated. But but our view about what is racist tends to be limited to very obvious acts. And modern racism, and psychologists refer to those type of behaviours as old-fashioned racism, not non-existent, but old-fashioned. Modern racism is subtle, it's indirect, and it's ambiguous and difficult to detect unless you're on the receiving end. And modern racists won't necessarily endorse or express racist stereotypes, but given the opportunity, they will make discriminatory decisions. So the classic research that's been done is just sending out 2 CVs to organisations which are identical in all respects, apart from the name. So it's a research paradigm that everybody will be familiar with. And it's just looking to see whether the perceived ethnicity of the individual actually has an impact in terms of their chances of being shortlisted for a job. Basically, the research done the OECD did a summary report of this. This research has been done in every Western European country, in North America, and it obviously includes Britain. And the results are always the same. If it's a minority-sounding candidate, they have far less chance of being shortlisted than if it's a majority-sounding candidate. One piece that some countries, they've done the research, they've repeated the research 10 years after. So in Sweden, Canada, North America, they've repeated the same research, replicated it 10 years after with no change in results. The University of Oxford published research last year. So there's no change in results in 2019 or 2018 when the research was carried out than there was 40 years before. So things have changed, but not as much as we would like to think. And that research was just on a name, Binna? Yeah, everything else is identical. Wow. Yeah. One piece of research actually found that a white person with a criminal record had a better chance of being shortlisted for a job than a black person without a criminal record. So that the paper was actually called The Stigma of a Criminal Record. And so this was almost like a byproduct of the research. They found that being black was actually more stigmatizing than having a criminal record.
Wow, that's really shocking, actually. I mean, for me to hear that, and I'm sure others on the call will feel the same. And there's even a comment in the group where it's just sad to hear that sort of thing, to have that harsh reality presented back to you, and in evidence like the research that you mentioned. So what about things that, I mean, like you say, there has been change has happened. So would you, are there any things that you think that organisations can do to recognise bias and to move towards being more inclusive?
The critical thing, actually, there are lots of things we can do, actually, Carla, and there are lots of things we can do. It's racism is not inevitable. It's not natural. Actually, one of the things I've learned from doing the research in the book is actually racism, in terms of dealing with people on the basis of their colour, making judgments based on people based on their colour, is actually a relatively new thing in terms of human evolution. So it's not natural, it's not inevitable, and there are lots of things that we can do to treat people fairly. But the most important thing is the role that leadership plays, and where leadership take this seriously, it sends a we know this that actually where the leaders set the tone, they set the direction, they need to role model the behaviours, and they need to make it clear that what their expectations are of everybody in an organisation, and then it moves from there. And so leadership need to accept that race is an issue, and clearly the many leaders already spoken this morning. But that kind of persistence with this, it needs to go beyond the level of attention that race has been giving over the last few months. It needs to carry on, and it needs to be sustained over many years now. Because once we stop giving it the attention, things don't just stop; they revert. And I think it's very important, this notion of sustainability in terms of the actions that we take. So it's not just this generation of leaders. We need to make sure that the generation of leaders who follow them, who succeed them, actually have the same degree of commitment that current leadership has.
Yeah, completely agree there. And I think even Stephen, when he introduced, our whole session, was talking about leadership. So I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, there are implicit association tests, and there are things that help that teams can do and organisations can do to look at unconscious bias, or conscious and unconscious bias, and to see what things they can address. What do you think about things like implicit association tests?
Yeah, they're fine. I mean, they're getting a bad rap at the moment. And there's psychologists who pile in. I'm a psychologist myself, and there's psychologists who pile in. This stuff's a load of rubbish, and actually, it's a tool. It's a technique. It can provide powerful insights to an individual. I did it for the first time in August of 2003. It had that significant an impact on me, Carla. I still remember the day I took it, August 2003, and I realised at that moment that I'm nowhere near as fair as I thought I was. And it's that kind of self-realization where it has a tremendous impact, and we should be using it for that. And actually, I'm very suspicious of psychologists who continually telling us these tools are ineffective, because they're the same psychologists who never report. They're evidence-based psychologists, they will call themselves, but they never report the evidence about the extent of discrimination in organisations. So the argument is actually totally lopsided. So they will actually show these techniques don't work in eradicating bias and identifying it, but they never talk about anything else. So the message is all about things that don't work, as opposed to there is a real problem here that we need to address. So I'm suspicious of those, but it does work, and it does work in some circumstances. The race tests are better than the gender tests. So there's a lot of tests. And some of the work that's been done using the implicit association test actually has demonstrated the way the doctors, for example, treat patients varies according to their scores on a race IAT. So that we kind of thrown the baby out of the bathwater because I think we want to. I think we want to find ways of dismissing race as an issue.
Yeah, I think there are so many elements of that I agree with. I think the thing that always stands out for me is that having been on the end of discrimination is how it makes that person feel. So I guess, you know, it's that compassion, it's that kindness, and it's that understanding that we're more similar than we are different. There is a question in the box, and this will probably be the last bit we've got time for, Binna, but what one thing can we all do to make a difference?
Yeah, the one thing, I think it relates to your last question, to be honest, Carla. The one thing that we have victims, and we have witnesses, and we have perpetrators, and we treat them as three separate boxes. So you can be a victim, I could be a victim, I could be a witness. But the thing I need to acknowledge is that I could be a perpetrator. So actually, we've got victims, witnesses, and perpetrators, and we will fall, depending on the circumstances, we could fall in any one of those three. Any one of those three. So I could be a perpetrator, and it's the recognition that I could be a perpetrator on some of the things that I may even not be aware that I'm doing. All right. Now, maybe I think you're right to say conscious and unconscious. People often talk just about unconscious. Some of the behaviors will be, but actually, I need to recognize my potential, the potential of me to be a perpetrator.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, actually, Binna, and it's been, as always, a pleasure listening to you and sharing the work that you've done. And I'll definitely be having a read of your latest book. And I'm just really grateful for your time today. And I'm sure that it's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope that you'll have a bit of time to stay around for some more of the session today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Binna. I'm passing now on to, do I go back to you now, Pete?
Yeah. Big thanks, Carla, and especially to you, Binna, for an inspiring session. And, there's some key messages for us all in there. I'm going to move on to the next session, which is titled Return to Nursing. There's been a lot of work during COVID around this. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Vince Baxter, who's going to be talking to Kate Pound, Richard Brownhill, and Paul Reeves, who's the head of nursing for NHS England and NHS Improvement. So, Vince, are you there?
Hi, thanks, Pete.
Over to you.
Thanks. So, one of the ways that the NHS responded to COVID-19 was to initiate a programme called Bring Back Nursing. And another element to the programme was also bringing healthcare support workers into the NHS. And I'm really pleased this morning to be joined by three colleagues, as Pete's just said, to talk about those two elements of the programme. So I'm going to start by talking to Paul Reeves, who is Head of Nursing, Education and New Roles at NHS England and NHS Improvement. So just going to begin with, Paul, could you just describe very briefly what the healthcare support worker programme entailed?
Yes, thank you very much for that. We started to bring back healthcare support workers back into the NHS. It was part of a programme of work that we were doing to try and bring staff back into the NHS, and it followed on from bringing back registered nurses, registered therapists even, and other registered professionals. So we started the healthcare support worker programme in May, and initially we started to look at bringing back people who had left the NHS within 3 years. But very quickly we realised that we would also, though, within this programme, though, have nurses who weren't eligible to be put back on the temporary register, nurses who had qualified elsewhere in other countries. And so we very quickly started to expand the programme to look at bringing people in who could fulfill healthcare support worker roles. And in so doing, then, what we did was to develop interview templates for people, so that when we were interviewing people to see with their eligibility to come back into the NHS, we had a structured format of questions for people to ask. So, and then if people then were successful through that interview process, we then passed them on to our HR teams who did all the security checks and so on and so forth. So it was a big program to bring back healthcare support workers or people who could fulfill healthcare support worker roles.
And what were the key things that really enabled the program to be delivered, Paul?
I think for me, I think one of the key things was bringing a team of people together to do those interviews. And that team was people right the way across the whole of NHS England and NHS Improvement. But also, though, we co-opted people in from the CQC who were essentially not doing much because they weren't doing their inspections. And we brought this eclectic team together of people with significant healthcare experience or who were clinicians, and were able to go through the templates and the information that we provided to bring people back into it. But for me, I think also was the daily huddles that we had to bring this team together. And also though the PDSA cycles we did every day. How was that for you? Is this template working? What were the stories that you were hearing? And sharing stories and learning from each other. And I think that was absolutely key, so that we could continue the PDSA cycles every day and everybody could learn. And of course, the ECIST team were very much supporting us with that and helping us to develop that shared learning experience.